Hello everyone, my name is Kond and today we'll be exploring the Mandela Effect Iceberg. Now I will be explaining what both of these things are, so if you already know that, you can skip to this time in the video. So, what this video will be is essentially me descending down a list of examples of Mandela Effect, describing them and trying to explain where could they have come from. And what is a Mandela Effect? Well, it's a false memory shared by a large group of people. The memory usually concerns a small detail like a part of a famous logo being wrong or a famous quote not actually existing, which leads some people to believe in a number of theories, most popular being that we as a humanity accidentally traversed to another reality where a lot of small details are slightly different than in our old reality. If you don't get it yet, I'm sure you will after a first couple of examples. There is a lot to go through on this iceberg, so let's go. Nelson Mandela died in prison. This is the one that started it all, and it is one of the weirdest and hardest to explain instances of the effect. So the Mandela Effect version of Nelson Mandela's life was that he died in prison in the 1980s, even though the most notable event of his life, which was becoming the president of South Africa, happened in 1994. It's hard to tell how popular Mandela was in the 80s outside of South Africa. At that time he was imprisoned for about 20 years after he led a sabotage campaign against the government, so probably not that many people heard or remembered him at that time, and they might have heard about a death of another imprisoned political activist and confused the two. There are two pieces of media that I was able to find that could be connected to the misinformation. Firstly, this New York Times article from 1985, which states that Mandela had to undergo a quite serious operation, and another one is this snippet that allegedly comes from a South African history book. Berenstain Bears. If Mandela's death started the whole effect, Berenstain Bears were the ones who popularized it. The originally called Berenstain Bears were believed by many to be called Berenstain Bears, and this one seems to affect the most people. This effect can be explained by the fact that these were children's cartoons and books, and it's really easy to misremember a single character in a name, especially that similar, and especially considering that many people didn't have a contact with these books since their childhood. There allegedly are proofs of the Berenstain Bears existing, as some people found their old tapes, books, or even websites with the name of the bears spelled with an E. This could have just been simple misspells from the past, but the more probable version is that these photos are simply photoshopped. Sinbad's Shazam. This is a movie that many people remember from their childhood. It even got to the point where people described the whole plot online and recreated the cover art. The movie supposedly starred Sinbad as a genie, but the actor has no memory of ever playing in that film, and is very open about that. He even played an April Fool's joke and recorded some fake footage of the movie. This instance of the Mandela Effect can be explained by the existence of the 1996 film Kazam, where Shaquille O'Neal plays a genie, and the fact that around that time Sinbad had a short skit in which he was dressed as a genie. Curious George's Tale. This is another big one, but I don't have too much to say about this. Curious George is an animated cartoon starring, well, Curious George, who is an ape and not a monkey, and that's why he doesn't have a tail, even though some people remember him having it. This effect could be explained by people automatically associating a tail with a monkey-looking creature. There also seems to be next to none residue. Most pictures of him with a tail are probably photoshopped, and the only possible evidence of him having a tail would be this single toy, but you know, it is a flashlight, so it has to have a handle. Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes were of course the popular series of cartoons made by the Warner Bros. Some people believe that the word tunes should be spelled with a double O instead of the regular spelling. Obviously, the easiest explanation is that this is caused by the changed spelling of the word loony. The word tunes never had the double O. Monopoly Man's monocle. The Monopoly Man wearing the monocle is probably another one, similar to the Curious George. We see an older guy in a suit and a top hat and we immediately think of a monocle to complete the picture. The guy never actually wore one. Well, maybe once in a commercial, but surely this isn't the cause of the effect. There are other instances of the effect, but none of them are official. They come from cosplays and portrayals of the guy from other shows like these ones.
I feel like
a king?
I was gonna say that Monopoly guy. He's got that monocle, the top hat, the bags with the dollar signs on them.
You must be the Monopoly guy.
Luke, I am your father. This one comes of course from the movie Empire Strikes Back and the scene where Darth Vader says, "No, I am your father."
No, I am your father.
The line "Luke, I am your father" never actually existed and was very often misquoted by all types of media. It was actually misquoted to the point when James Earl Jones, the original voice actor behind Darth Vader, says the quote wrong.
The redneck Jedi says, "Luke, I am your father."
Obviously, this instance of the effect comes from the fact that the quote "Luke, I am your father" sounds like 100 times better. Also, he actually addresses Luke personally like 30 seconds earlier.
Luke, you do not yet realize your importance.
Kit Kat. Many people believe that the famous chocolate bar company Kit Kat has a dash between the two words in their logo. However, at first there seems to be no evidence of the dash ever being there. The history of the company logos shows nothing, and every single picture of the name with a dash is photoshopped. Even the company, when asked about it directly on Twitter, responded with this message, saying that the logo has never been hyphenated. But it turns out that they are wrong, and the logo actually was hyphenated at 2 points in the history. In the 1920s, as you can see on this wrapper, and supposedly during the World War II, but I wasn't able to find any evidence on that. Pikachu's colored tail. To be honest, this one messes with me the most, as I clearly remember Pikachu's tail to have a black tip. However, it turns out that its tail is completely yellow. The explanation for this one could be pretty simple. The confusion might just come from the fact that Pikachu's ears have black tips, and while looking at them, you might immediately attribute the black color to its tail. Also, it turns out that bootleg companies sometimes change Pikachu's tail color to avoid copyright claims, so if you also remember the Pikachu's tail to have a black tip, it is possible that you had a bootleg toy of the Pokemon in your childhood, as they were very popular, especially in Europe. Also, one more thing, there actually is an official example of a Pikachu with a black tipped tail, and it comes from the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire cosplay versions of the Pokemon. Robber emoji. There is no record of a robber emoji ever existing on Android or iOS operating systems. However, some people believe that there was at least one emoji of a robber. Nowadays, there are actually two groups of believers who remember two different versions of the robber. A frontal one where we can only see the face and a bit of the chest of the guy, and another one where the supposed robber runs away with a stereotypical money bag. This one is kinda hard to explain because, you know, with the existence of so many emojis, it's likely that some people will make mistakes, but it's really weird that so many of them remember this specific one. The only robber emoji that I was able to find is this one, and it comes from Skype. However, that's not really it. Interview with a vampire. So there was a book called Interview with the Vampire that was later turned into a popular film starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. However, the title of the film is remembered by many to be Interview with a Vampire, and this one at first seems like a simple confusion between the articles A and D, as it's very easy to mistake the two if the word before the article ends with a the sound. So if someone says it very quickly, like the interview with the vampire, it's very hard to tell what that person actually said. Listen to this, for example.
So I wrote a short story called Interview with a Vampire.
This was the author saying the name of her novel, and to be honest, after reading that a couple of times, I still am not sure about what did she say. And to be fair, the film was even referenced as Interview with a Vampire on some DVD cases and in newspapers, but these could have just been misspells. Life is like a box of chocolates. This one is arguably the biggest and most known example of the effect, as most people think that at the beginning of the film Forrest Gump, he says life is like a box of chocolates, while the real quote is,
"My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates."
The line is so often misquoted that even YouTube videos with the quote in them have incorrect titles. It was even misquoted on the back of the DVD and during the Oscars ceremony.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
But actually, I think that this example is one of the easiest to explain by the simple fact that this quote is said one more time near the end of the movie.
Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest.
So we have one quote that says life was like a box of chocolates and another one that says life is a box of chocolates. So now it should be easy to get where all the confusion is coming from. Oh, and also there is actually a version of the scene where he says the line just like people remember it.
My mom always said that life is like a box of chocolates.
However, this version was just a draft and it wasn't used in the film. Febreze. So Febreze is a popular air refreshener brand that many people believe to be called Febreze in the past. Not much to say about this one, as it seems to be very easy to misread it, especially with the word breeze existing in English language and the word brez not. However, there seems to be some weird residue in a form of this Instagram post and some official documents, all with the name spelled incorrectly. Oscar Mayer. This American meat company is actually called Oscar Mayer, even though it seems like most people remember it as Oscar Mayer. To be honest, this seems like it could have easily been mistaken in the past, as the pronunciation of the two words is very similar.
Oscar Mayer. Oscar Mayer.
For me as a person whose primary language is not English, the difference isn't noticeable. However, for a lot of Americans this is a big deal, and there is a little bit of evidence that the name was Mayer spelled with an E. There is a fragment of a legal document from a court case, this snippet from the Oprah show, and some newspaper articles with the incorrect spelling, with this one in particular being interesting, because we can see the name Oscar Mayer on the car, but down in the article it says Oscar Mayer. Hello Clarice. Hello Clarice is a non-existent quote from the movie Silence of the Lambs. This line is supposed to appear in the scene when Dr. Hannibal Lecter meets with Clarice for the first time, but what he actually says is
Good morning.
Dr. Lecter, my name is Clarice Starling. May I speak with you?
And it seems right for me, as it wouldn't make any sense for him to say hello Clarice right before she introduces herself as Clarice. And when researching this case, I came across people who said that this line was said in the phone call between Hannibal and Clarice in the sequel to The Silence of Lambs called Hannibal. So I tried to check it out for myself, and what he actually says is,
Well, Clarice, have the lambs stopped screaming?
It's even weirder that the official Facebook page used the quote to promote the movie, and it was quoted many times in other media, most notably by Jim Carrey in the movie Cable Guy.
Silence of the Lambs. Hello, Clarice.
Fruit of the Loom cornucopia. This is another big one. Most people remember the logo of Fruit of the Loom to have a cornucopia somewhere in the back, while the real logo never had one. It's famous not only because of how many people remember the cornucopia, but also for what is possibly the most convincing piece of residue among all of the effect examples. I am talking of course about the 1973 Fruit of the Loom jazz album by Frank West, which is a clear reference to the Fruit of the Loom logo. So by this point in the video, you probably know that I am not really a believer in the effect, and I always try to find a reasonable explanation. But this one, oh man, this one messes with me too much. And to add to all of this, there was an interview done with the author of this image, and he specifically remembers designing the crooked flute to look like the cornucopia from the logo. Although, to be fair, in the other question he states that he made up the art from his imagination without referencing the logo, so this could be the explanation. The version of this logo with cornucopia in them was also referenced in South Park and in Ant-Bully, so even though I personally don't remember ever seeing the cornucopia, there just has to be something to it. Sex in the City. So the actual title of this series is of course Sex and the City, and if the Mandela Effect is not real, then this would have to be the most often incorrectly said media title, or at least incorrectly perceived.
Now Sex in the City? That's funny.
This is Michael Patrick King's first draft of the Sex and the City movie.
So all of these clips are used as examples of residue, and even the caption creating AI on YouTube recognizes these fragments as Sex in the City. However, it has to be said that the pronunciation of Sex in the City is so similar to Sex and the City, especially if it is said very quickly, that it leaves a lot of room for mishearing. So it seems like the explanation of this one would be very similar to the interview with the vampire. But there is a lot of other evidence of a series called Sex in the City existing at one point. There are movie posters referencing the show with the incorrect title, there are newspapers with the title spelled wrong, and there is even this example of the Grammys getting the title wrong.
Kim Cattrall, Sex and the City. Kristen Davis, Sex and the City.
Sex in the City. Sex in the City.
Sex and the City, of course.
Mona Lisa never smiled. I don't know about this one. Some people say that Mona Lisa used to have a neutral expression, even though there is a ton of evidence stating that this is not the case. The smile is one of the biggest reasons of why this painting is so famous. The smile itself has been researched and studied, and it has been proven that your perception of it can change depending on what part of the painting you are looking at the moment. There are also other studies that greatly expand our knowledge about the smile and the perception of emotions in general. Oh, and there is also a movie called The Smile of Mona Lisa, if you are still not convinced that this is a bad example of the Mandela Effect. Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops is an American cereal brand, and in this example the effect concerns the double O in the word fruit, which has apparently always been there, even though some people remember this word on the logo to be spelled in a regular way. It's kinda hard to say anything else about this one, as it seems to be a thing similar to the Looney Tunes effect, and apart from that, there seems to be next to none residue about the logo ever being the regularly spelled Fruit Loops. Maybe except for this one logo trivia game, but it's likely a mistake here. It's also worth mentioning that this is the one effect that is believed to flip-flop the most, and people are going crazy over it. If you don't know if something flip-flops in the Mandela Effect community, it means that it changes at least 2 times between the state of how people remember it and how it actually is. Or should I say, how it actually is in our current reality. Volkswagen logo is connected. The Volkswagen logo is remembered by many to look like this. However, when we take a look at the history of the logo, we can clearly see that it has never never been connected between the letters V and W. It sounds like a minuscule detail, but actually when we compare the two logos side by side, we can see that the difference is quite noticeable. There also seems to be some quite interesting residue concerning the connected logo, like this video, where we can see the supposed old version on a couple of frames. However, this one could be easily explained by the shakiness and general potato quality of the video. But that is not the only example, as there seems to be many more proofs from other media, such as movies or newspapers. But still, you have to remember that many of the pictures could have been photoshopped at one point, and the cameras are not always perfect and can sometimes omit small details, like in this example where the logo appears to be connected, but this effect is simply caused by a motion blur. C-3PO never had a silver leg. Well, it actually turns out that he always had one, and this particular effect stunned me when I first learned about it, cause I love Star Wars and I have watched the original trilogy around 10 times, and I have never noticed the silver leg. And to be fair, it is not that easy to notice it in the first place. Take a look at these shots, for example. In many scenes of the film, the silver leg is impossible to notice, and the fact that C-3PO usually has normal golden legs in animations or toys doesn't really help either. Also, the actor behind C-3PO, Anthony Daniels, once said that even the photographer for the movie didn't notice the silver leg at first, so you really shouldn't be worried if you missed it too. Jiffy. So the name of the famous peanut butter is Jif, but many people remember it to be Jiffy at some point in the past, but of course it turns out that it was never called this way. However, it has to be said that this example of the effect stands out amongst others, as it seems to have a ton of residue concerning it, like this Jiffy burger, Jiffy recipes, or even Jiffy beer. It also seems like the brand used to be called Jiffy on a ton of old coupons and newspapers, even though on some of these coupons there was a picture of a jar with the name Jif right next to it. The Jiffy peanut butter even makes an appearance in some TV cartoons. So how do you explain this? Well, there is also a peanut butter called Skippy, which could create the confusion, like Jif plus Skippy equals Jiffy. And obviously the word Jiffy represents a very small amount of time, which certainly adds to the confusion. Take a look at this clip, for example.
Okay, do this quickly, peanut butter, peanut butter, not Skippy, but the other one. The other one. Jelly.
They're looking for Jiffy. Jiffy. Oh, Jiffy!
Oh, and just as a fun fact, some people believe that the brand was called Jif with a double F at some point in time. For the logo with no squiggle. Once again, let's look at the history of the logo, and we can see that ever since it took a more modern turn, the letter F has always been drawn with a squiggle. But of course, there are some people who remember it drawn without one like this. And similarly to the Volkswagen logo, if you were to go out and start looking at random cars, you wouldn't find any cars with the logo from the supposed alternate reality. However, this example seems to have a bit more residue to it, as the old logo has been found on some car parts or toys. These examples, however, could have a very easy explanations, they could be all bootlegs. Elementary, my dear Watson. This is a famous Sherlock Holmes quote that has actually never been said by the character in any of the short stories or novels written by the character's original creator, Arthur Conan Doyle, although the word elementary has been used at least a couple of times, and Sherlock often refers to his assistant as dear Watson. There is even one instance when he says elementary, my dear Potson to another character. So it turns out that the quote elementary, my dear Watson was somewhat associated to the character by the fans and used later in Sherlock Holmes productions that were not created by the original author, like in this example.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
In the end, I'd call this a bad example of the Mandela effect, but a very interesting example of how easy it is to wrongly attribute a quote to someone. And that is it for the video. Subscribe to be notified when the next part comes out. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next one.